Awesome, thanks. First of all, Howard, what does ABCD mean in your world?
So I work in higher education, and specifically in the field of community engagement in higher education. So I direct a center that promotes community engagement throughout the curriculum of DePaul University in Chicago. And DePaul is among many universities globally that are seeking to understand what community engagement means in curriculum, in co-curricular work, in research and scholarship. So we're an institution, so when thinking about ABCD, we come at it from the approach of being an institution and what is the role of institutions within an ABCD framework.
Yep.
As one of the assets,
Yes.
but as one that has to think critically about how it engages community.
So what does that look like in terms of what role do you see institutions playing in regarding a healthy relationship between community and institution?
So in many ways I have a sort of radical view of that, and then I have a sort of more realistic day-to-day view of that. I'll start with my radical view of that, which is to say that institutions who are interested in working in communities need to radically rethink their role in engaging with communities, rather than this sort of town-gown interaction where universities are figuring out, okay, how can we build good relationships with the community, moving to, first and foremost, a way of thinking about what is a reciprocal relationship between an institution the size of a college or university and communities that are surrounding it. So there's a checking oneself within the context of before working in the community, and that as an institutional representative, one has to sort of rethink what it means to approach the community, because it's very easy to approach the community with the perspective of, oh, we have this knowledge and these skills to teach you. That's mistake number one. Especially from an ABCD framework, institutions need to begin by being really good listeners, really listening to the degree by which they stop offering any kinds of aid or ideas or prescriptions for community change, but rather listen to what the communities are already doing, identify those connectors and knowledge bases within the community that already exist, and begin to think about what a relationship might be with those folks that are individuals and that are neighborhood associations and that are other community-based institutions within the communities that universities are working.
Absolutely.
So it's that initial sort of checking oneself, checking an institutional ego to be understanding of oneself within that context, both as an individual.
Change, isn't it?
It's a cultural change, and that's a radical view. The more realistic day-to-day view is to recognize that there are people within universities who might have that more radical understanding, but on two fronts. One, there are many other people who do not, and they're also going to be engaging with the same communities. So respect that people are in the process, right? And not try to come in with sort of a radical perspective on like you're doing something wrong, but rather working with people within the institution to help them move towards a process of offering that personal dignity to the communities and individuals who, within those communities especially, who have talents and skills and who are already doing very successful work, who have knowledge that is not seen as formalized necessarily in an academic sense, but is really important nonetheless. And so, essentially, that's one aspect. The other aspect is recognizing that many people in the community are so accustomed to people coming in and saying, we offer something to give you, to help you, to assist you, that they themselves are in a process of beginning to understand that the powers that they have are relevant, the knowledge that they have is relevant, the skills and associations that they already have within their communities are relevant to the extent that they don't necessarily need to have somebody come in and teach them something. Now, it's not about saying there's a critical perspective here that is a more global political perspective that must be sort of implanted, because there's a fundamental critique that ABCD could be saying, people coming out from the outside could be saying, oh, you already have the resources and skills to do it yourself, to solve your structural inequalities. Mistake number one. That's not what ABCD is about. ABCD is about building power within communities through association, through skills and talents that have been invisible perhaps, that are now becoming visible, that are now being connected with other skills and talents within the communities, and therefore power emerges in a way that can mean that people begin to understand it and have the confidence to demand equity.
Yes. Wow. I'm thinking about a lot about how do we, from a government perspective, I get the sense that communities don't trust government, even local government. They don't understand what they do, but also don't trust. And I also feel that local government and perhaps a lot of institutions don't trust the community. When the community says, hey, give me the wheel, give me the keys, I can drive this, there's no trust there to allow that. How would you approach a more trustworthy relationship between the two? Where do you think that begins? It's a tough question, but...
It is a very tough question, a complex one. I'll go back to the first and foremost, the meeting point between an institution like government, which is an institution, and local people who are living day to day in their communities and trying to figure out how to have the wherewithal to be healthy and survive. The first and foremost thing that governments can do is, government representatives can do, is come in and really erase any kind of prescription that they have on what will solve problems. Now, that's very hard for governments because, especially in democratic context, governments often see themselves as, well, we were elected by the people, and even people who were appointed or hired within governments, they're a reflection of the people's will. But that's not participatory democracy. Participatory democracy is a process. It doesn't end with the election. And so when governments, in a democratic system at least, and I'll stick with that for the moment, have to first and foremost recognize that engaging with community is participatory democracy building, not a solution process. It's about building the participatory democracy on the ground that give people the power to say, here's what we're interested in pursuing on not just a one time, but in a trajectory, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily an ending trajectory, right? Because there are new generations that evolve and new issues that evolve and global contexts, national contexts, regional contexts that evolve. So it's not ending. The ball keeps bouncing.
That's right. Jeez, that's such a good perspective on it. What role? Just last question. How do you see? Are you hopeful for this change to happen? Perhaps maybe you're heading towards a radical change. Are you optimistic that could happen?
Well, I'm not extremely optimistic about a radical change. What keeps me optimistic is the ability to go out and find those contexts where it's working, to document them and expose them through cameras and through writing and through other types of medium that show and illustrate to people at different levels of society who are working at different levels of society, that there are ways to engage and support community development that aren't about a top-down, in a sense, prescriptive approach. And so when you're, for me at least, the ability to document the way that communities are already involved in building community and addressing issues that are of concern to them gives me hope.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks so much, Howard.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, mate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes me think a lot about just outside of this.